Good evening, everyone. Clare Lopez here, Lopez Liberty, LLC. Here with you for another episode of Sharia Crime Stoppers, and a momentous time. I'm happy to be with you at this particular time so that I can comment on some of the things that have been going on. I have just pulled myself away from the TV back out there in my living room, where I listened to President Trump giving a very brief statement to the media assembled in the Rose Garden at the White House. And essentially, what he said is that enough is enough, and that the lawlessness, the destruction of property, the injuring of people, the assaults against law enforcement, and the rioting in the streets, the looting, will stop. He called on the nation's governors, with whom he spoke earlier this afternoon in a conference call, spoke with the governors, and in this White House press conference, reminded the governors that it is their responsibility to ensure the safety of their citizens and the security of their streets in their states. He encouraged them to call out the National Guard in each state, but then he said, if you do not restore security to your states, he, the president, will do it for them. And what he means is that as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, he has the authority under both the Constitution and the Insurrection Act of 1807 to use the U.S. military, the forces, the armed forces of the U.S. military on U.S. soil. And this is an exception to the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. And this is the exception, the Insurrection Act of 1807. You can call out the U.S. military to go to those places where lawlessness cannot be subdued, where there is insurrection. And that's what this is. This is insurrection, this is rebellion, this is revolt against the state, against the constitutional order of our republic. And he will do that if the governors do not restore order themselves. The last couple of minutes of the president's talk this evening referred to the chaos that I'm sure many of us saw going on in Washington, D.C., the capital of the country, last night, where there were multiple fires, assaults on law enforcement personnel, something like 60 members of the Secret Service injured by flying projectiles, bricks, other things. The historic landmark church, St. John's, across the street from the White House, across the street from Lafayette Park, outside of the White House there, set on fire. Good thing that the fire department got there in time to limit the damage to that historic landmark church, put the fire out, but nevertheless, there's damage. The president, remarking on all of that, told all of us that order will be restored, especially in the nation's capital. And as we were even watching on split screen on the TV, security forces were moving in to enforce the 7 p.m. Eastern Time curfew imposed in Washington, D.C. tonight. And among those law enforcement units were the Washington, D.C. police force. You had Secret Service, of course, National Guard, and you had mounted police on horses to move people back and out and away from Lafayette Park, away from the White House, and to begin enforcing that curfew that takes place tonight. So with all of that as a preview, I have a PowerPoint presentation for you tonight on the red-green axis. Now, as many of you watching probably know, the red of this red-green axis refers to the forces of communism and Marxism in this country. The green to the forces of the Islamic Jihad, the Islamic movement, of which the Muslim Brotherhood is the lead vanguard element here in the United States. They work in collaboration. They collude against the constitutional order of the United States. They are behind the unrest, the violence, the insurrection that is going on across the country, and that is further in collaboration with separatist, nationalist, violent Black Lives Matter movement affiliates, and should mention too the involvement, at least in the inspiration, the association and connection, and of course the internet, online collaboration from communist forces in Russia, but even more specifically and more overwhelmingly from China, the Communist Party of China. So let me go to the share screen here and bring up this presentation. And let me see here, I need to get this. All right, come on, there we go. So I am calling this Street Insurrection, the red-green axis unleashes on America. I'm going to skip through some things, and I will apologize in advance because this is a very long PowerPoint that I originally created about 2016 to share with classes that I was helping to instruct along with John Guandolo at Understanding the Threat. And I will skip through in the interests of a little bit of brevity tonight. So if you see me skipping over slides, you're not going to miss anything really important. It's a matter of more and additional detail that we can still get the main points from, even if I skip some slides. So I do especially want to make sure that we allow time at the end for some questions and answers. So let's begin here with the events of last week, beginning on Memorial Day night, 25th of May, 2020, when African-American George Floyd was killed by Derek Chauvin, a Minneapolis City Police Department officer who knelt on his neck for 8 to 9 minutes. You will probably have seen conflicting autopsy reports coming out. Those will have to be resolved at some point, but the officer named here, Chauvin, and 3 others who looked on and did nothing. All 4 of those have been fired. Chauvin's been arrested and he's facing multiple charges, including charges of 3rd-degree murder. Now that incident, horrific as it was, thereafter triggered, I mean quickly triggered, a very well organized, a very well funded, and a coordinated assault of street violence that erupted almost simultaneously in cities, primarily urban areas, across the entire United States. Thousands, and these numbers even may be too few, as this presentation was finished by yesterday evening or early this morning. But in any case, thousands of National Guard have been called out to cities nationwide now as we speak. Let me show you some images. This is going to be quick, from different cities across the country, beginning from Saturday night, the 30th of May, to last night, Sunday, the 31st of May. Let's just breeze through these. I'm sure you've seen many of these yourselves, but just to refresh our memories and show them to those who may not have seen all of this. Here's Jacksonville, Florida, where rioters actually slashed the neck of a police officer. I believe that he is surviving, not life-threatening injuries, but nevertheless, other rioters attacked. Police vehicles were vandalized and burned. New York City, Brooklyn, especially New York City, scenes of unimaginable violence as I call him, comrade, socialist, if not communist, Mayor de Blasio cited his white privilege and offered understanding as violent thugs rampaged across the city, destroying property, looting stores and shops, attacking NYPD officers, who many of whom were injured. Vehicles were burned, both civilian and NYPD vehicles, property destroyed and looted, as I said, across the city. Here is Seattle, Washington. A lot of these slides are going to have some of the same colors, the yellow, red, burning of vehicles, orange, red, burning of vehicles and other property. City there in Seattle, Washington, engulfed in arson, looting, and violence. City police department vehicles set on fire. The Washington governor, Governor Jay Inslee, did activate 200 National Guards, but he helpfully let the looters and the rioters know that they would be unarmed and they would work under the direction of the Seattle city leadership. A lot of good that's going to do. Here's Miami, Florida, more burning vehicles. Miami-Dade County Mayor Carlos Jimenez imposed a mandatory curfew. The protests there, as elsewhere, turned violence. Vehicles were set on fire. I-95, that's Interstate 95, as you probably know, runs north-south from New England all the way down to Florida, was temporarily blocked, actually, by protesters, and this Bayside Marketplace and other places looted as well. Nashville, Tennessee, especially horrific there because the Nashville City Hall, this is last night, and courthouse there were attacked. But here, this particular arsonist with a quite distinctive tattoo pattern on his arm, so helpful of him to appear without his shirt on, shown and captured on video in the act of arson against, this is the City Hall, I think, or it might have been the courthouse, but in any case, he's caught on video and either has been or shortly will be arrested. Street thugs smashed windows, set fires all over Nashville, Tennessee. For some reason, the mayor of Nashville, John Cooper Nash, remained silent, at least up until last night. This is Chicago, Illinois. Chicago, Illinois is destroyed. It's a wasteland. It saw some of the worst violence in the country over the last several days, not just last night. Widespread looting, only a very scattered and minimal police response in any of these places. Shops were looted, restaurants, even public places and homes. Mayor Lightfoot denied the local, Chicago's own police department request for National Guard backup. Flames everywhere. And as you can see, these horrific scenes at the bottom of this slide of two Chicago Police Department officers, one's a man, one's a woman, being dragged through the streets by the protesters. Let's go to Oakland, California, where very sadly, a Department of Homeland Security federal law enforcement officer, African-American, was shot and killed, another injured, as they provided security and defended the Ronald V. Dellums Federal Building, the U.S. courthouse in Oakland, California. That took place, I believe it was on Saturday night. But all through Oakland, likewise as elsewhere, building glass doors were smashed, anti-police graffiti spray painted across all kinds of places, public buildings. Governor Gavin Newsom called for patience and perspective. Okay. It wasn't just some of these inner cities, but Beverly Hills. They got through police lines, which you can see in one of the photos on this page here, trying to hold them back, did not work. They broke through the lines. They went into Beverly Hills and even into private residential areas. You can see the kinds of things they were spray painting on walls, and they looted up and down Rodeo Drive. Rodeo Drive, one of the posh shopping areas of Beverly Hills, thoroughly and completely looted, even though there were, as you can see, plywood boards put up in front of glass windows. They broke through all of that, looted jewelry stores and other things. Police, who knows where. Downtown Los Angeles, California. Here, sadly, a lot of the shops looted were not high-end luxury goods or jewelry stores. These were mom and pop stores, meaning small, privately owned businesses, many of them owned by immigrants, smashed and looted just like everything else. Police department vehicles attacked and burned there too. A curfew has been imposed in Los Angeles. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The violence there, overwhelming. Shops destroyed and looted. Same story as everywhere else. Police attacked, apparently with impunity, not enough, not out in force, not authorized to use force to stop the attacks. Rioters turned even there in Philadelphia to looting private homes. A couple of the scenes from that city. And again here, Washington, D.C. These are scenes from last night, Sunday, the 31st of May, when rioters actually surrounded the entire White House complex in downtown Washington, D.C. The President Trump, actually was moved by the Secret Service down into the bunker, down in the basement of the White House for his safety. Okay, that is the extent to which it got last night. The Secret Service, the Washington, D.C. police force, the National Guard were defending the White House, and they would not have allowed them onto the grounds of the White House itself. That was not going to happen. But outside of that complex, outside of that compound area, throughout Washington, D.C. and the areas nearby to the White House, arson, looting, and violence went on. It appeared with impunity. And I think that is what really tipped the president over into the announcements that he made tonight about law enforcement and the return of law and order. All right, let me now turn to the main part of this presentation itself and talk to you about the Unholy Alliance, as I call it, or the red-green axis and the elements of it. The images on this screen show you in the upper left-hand corner, Saul Alinsky. We will talk about him some more, but of course he is the author of Rules for Radicals, the blueprint, the handbook for civic unrest and violence to bring a city to a point of chaos. The middle logo on this page is the logo of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood's political umbrella group in the United States called the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations. It is a political umbrella group of the Brotherhood. It includes many more of the well-known Brotherhood front groups like CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, ICNA, Islamic Circle of North America, Muslim American Society, and others. Upper right-hand corner, I'm sure you all recognize that logo, the logo of the Muslim Brotherhood. So the Islamic movement, Muslim Brotherhood, is one part of this three-part red-green axis. Then we have Black Lives Matter, that movement, and all of the associated Black separatist groups that are affiliated with it. We'll talk about that in detail. And third, of course, ANTIFA, the groups associated with it, and other Alinsky-type, Alinskyite anarchists, because that's what they are. They're not terrorists. These are anarchists who are attempting a revolt, a rebellion against the system to bring down the law and order of our constitutional republic. That is their target. Our Constitution, our legal system, our system of law and order. That's what they're after, to bring it all down in chaos. And then out of that chaos, each of these, while they have differing objectives, and if you look at their their web pages and their manifestos and so forth, different kinds of objectives, yes, but they are allied, they work together. Yes, it's ad hoc, it's opportunistic, but out of the chaos, each hopes to effect in the United States, each hopes that it will come out on top. That's what that's about. Star Spangled Sharia is a book published by the Center for Security Policy back in 2015. And this is the story, this book, this monograph is the story of the establishment of the Muslim Brotherhood's USCMO, Council on Muslim Organizations in America, and the plan at that time for the 2016 elections, and of course those to come. Now we're looking at 2020 elections. I will just briefly mention part of how the organization took place of the Muslim Brotherhood in America and the USCMO. Take us back 4 years plus to February of 2016, when the very first, and I think to this date the only, international conference of Muslim councils in the West was held. Don't know if you caught it at the time or remember it, but I thought this was significant. Along the bottom of this logo or this advertisement maybe, announcing that conference, you see the flags of all these different countries that were represented at that conference, International Conference of Muslim Councils in the West. And you can see many Western flags. I'm sure you recognize flags, of course, the United States, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, and then you see others, for example, from Latin America. There is the flag of Brazil along the bottom there, the flag of El Salvador, the flag of Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, and others across the bottom of that advertisement panel there. At this time, of course, we are in the Obama administration. So, of course, the Obama administration sent a couple of representatives. Arsalan Suleiman, at that time, the U.S. envoy to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, attended this Muslim Brotherhood gathering. And then Representative Keith Ellison, at that time, congressional representative from Minnesota, today, the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. We'll come back to him later. He was a featured speaker at this Muslim Brotherhood conference. All right, the plan. What is the plan? And we can see it playing out. This slide dates back 4 years, but the plan was a step-by-step gradual insinuation of Muslim Brotherhood objectives into the U.S. political system. And what we see now is the unfolding of this well thought out strategy to increase Muslim involvement, Muslim Brotherhood especially, involvement in the electoral process. I have another PowerPoint that I've given to several audiences called The Rise of the Princelings. Princelings meaning second and third generation of Muslim Brotherhood families entering into the political process, contesting elections, and sometimes winning those elections. That is the plan. It's unfolding in front of our eyes. This is Usama Jamal. He's the Secretary General of the USCMO. And again, we're talking here about the political objectives to insinuate Muslim Brotherhood affiliated, associated voters and candidates into the political process. The imagery on the website, you might recall that logo I showed you, all about red, white, and blue. It's why we called the book Star Spangled Sharia, but it's Sharia. All right, here again, the logo, the USCMO, becoming a party, various of the front groups, including Jetpack Inc., which is an offshoot of CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. All of these are working towards that politicization, entry of the Brotherhood and its affiliates, associates into our electoral process. Just details here, appealing, I mean, as any party does, Republican, Democratic, Libertarian, anything, appeals to segments of society, sectors of society, the soccer moms of the suburbs, the Hispanic community, the African-American community. Well, the Muslim Brotherhood is doing the very same thing. Here is the slide that I want to use as a transition slide from the Muslim Brotherhood aspect of the red-green axis into the Black Lives Matter movement and its associates. And so what I'm showing here on this slide, the logo of CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, lead organization in the USCMO, and over to the right top, that is Nihad Awad, the executive director of CARE, and a quote of his from 2016 when he is appearing, I'm sorry, late 2015, December 2015, when he appeared and spoke at the Mass ICNA conference held in Chicago, Illinois. And the quote here, in 2016, minorities will play a major role in the elections of 2016. But note to the bottom there, Black Lives Matter is our matter, he said. Black Lives Matter is our campaign. Okay, there's your transition. There's your crossover. There's your linkage behind the scenes, complete throwing in support of the Islamic movement, Muslim Brotherhood in America, with the communist-founded, violent, Black nationalist, separatist, Black Lives Matter movement. What they're doing, the USCMO, in pandering, that's the only word I can think of, pandering to the African American community in America, they use narratives and memes, and they're seeking to establish street cred, if you will, by embracing the Black Lives Matter movement, but using memes that people will recall from the very legitimate civil rights movement of the 1960s. Social justice, equating that with Islamophobia. The new victims of injustice in America are the Muslims, you see. Never mind that Muslims come from every race, color, ethnic group in the world. I wanted to show you this photo. If you can see on this slide here, we're showing a protest march, and the man in the front wearing the yellow placard, or carrying that yellow placard, it says, "Stop racism, end Islamophobia." A perfect illustration, I think, of what I'm saying here, the conflation of these memes and these narratives to establish street cred for the Muslim Brotherhood with the African American narrative. Black Lives Matter movement, what is it? Well, beginning in 2013, Black Lives Matter was an organized front project of the Marxist-Leninist Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Hashtag, it's on social media this way, Black Lives Matter is used as a conduit, as an organization, as a rallying point for anarchists, left-wing, anti-Israel agenda. They seek, and they have been in this instance right now, across the United States right now, during this past week, inciting chaos and disorder and riots to cause, at a minimum, law enforcement injuries. We hope it will not come to any more deaths than the one federal security officer that I mentioned out in Oakland, California, thus far killed one. We hope no more. Causing all kinds of civilian harm to their places of business, and to them individually themselves, being beaten in the streets, and of course, as we've shown, destruction of property with utter disregard for US laws and law enforcement officers. They openly proclaim that they are at war with the US government. So who is the Freedom Road Socialist Organization? Offshoot of it, maybe I shouldn't say now, but an offshoot of it is now called the Liberation Road. Premier, #1 expert on all of these groups, and the one from whom I learned a great deal of what I can tell you tonight, is Trevor Laden. I really recommend looking him up online, following Trevor Laden, his blog, his books, his films and documentaries. Excellent information. He, a native of New Zealand, and now living here in the United States with his American wife, knows more about these Marxist communist groups and their infiltration into American society, and unfortunately the political process, more about that than I do or anybody else I know. Trevor Laden. In any case, here is the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, their logo up there in the two corners. It is openly Marxist, making no bones about it. socialist, anti-Israel, pro-BDS movement. BDS, of course, boycott, divest, and sanction movement. Totally aligned, openly aligned with Palestinian terrorists in both Gaza and Judea and Samaria. And according to its 2001 unity statement, they say they must be prepared to advance our interests and defend the people by any means necessary. That's a place where you hear that phrase come from, by any means necessary. And that means all kinds of violence, the kind of violence you're seeing right now. These guys are in the middle of it. All right, co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm going to show you, I think it's 2, maybe 3 of them. They're all women, by the way. Alicia Garza, she says that she was born in 1981. She formerly served in these different places that you see here on this screen. I won't go through all of them, but you can see the communist roots, the communist affiliations of some of these groups, and that is where she comes from. Here is another of the Black Lives Matter movement co-founders. She is Opal I. Tometi, born in 1984 to an illegal, a pair of illegal immigrant parents coming to the United States from Nigeria, grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, attended university there. Now she can, you can see her background a little bit here. National organizer for Black Alliance for Just Immigration, in other words, supporting the open borders agenda, and the Soros-founded Freedom Road Socialist Organization front group. One more of the Black Lives Matter movement founders, co-founders, this is Patrice M. Cullors. She self-describes herself as queer, polyamorous practitioner of life. I'm not completely sure what that all is, but trained, she says, quote here, to believe in international fight, the international fight against US imperialism. She has a background in liberal and leftist organizations here too, as you can see, but skip to the bottom one, trained by former Weather Underground terrorist organization of the 60s, Eric Mann. All right, I know the type, the font is small on this page, and it's not necessary to read all of it. You will be able to see this PowerPoint, by the way, posted up later on if you want to go back and catch every one of these bullet points in the manifesto. But just to give you a flavor for what they're talking about, you remember what then Mayor Rudy Giuliani, New York City, called the broken windows policy. And that meant you don't let the little stuff go. You don't let broken windows just go, vandalism at a low level go. You police it at that level so that it doesn't get any worse. That's what broken windows policing means. Well, of course, they want to stop that. They are obviously opposed to police enforcement of law and order. And you can see, you know, some of these points here. I'll point out a racial one. Black Lives Matter is racist. Have a racial, the racial makeup of the police departments reflect the communities they serve. Well, nothing wrong with that unless you adjust the criteria, the tests, or make allowances for whatever race it may be in the interest of keeping some sort of an artificial percentage quota. That's what would be wrong. I'll let you read through the rest of these because it is small type and quite a few items here, but that was from their website. Their Black Lives Matter movement logo up to the left. The newest Twitter handle is defund the police. You've got that right, defund the police. This went up on their website at Black Lives Matter movement yesterday, I believe, the Sunday, May the 30th. And this is a quote from the posting at their website. Enough is enough. Our pain, our cries, our need to be seen and heard resonate throughout this entire country. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely legitimate. But when they talk about radical, sustainable solutions that affirm the prosperity of Black lives, what they're talking about is redistribution of wealth, the forcible redistribution of wealth, and in primarily through the enforced payment, extraction of payment of reparations to African Americans in the United States. That's what that last line there means. All right, here is, yes, the Honorable Rashida Tlaib, who is representative from the state of Michigan to the US Congress. And here she is holding forth yesterday, but why I wanted to point out these tweets of hers is her support for the defund the police hashtag and movement that I just showed you on the previous page from the Black Lives Matter movement's own website. So here we have a member of Congress openly supporting a communist Marxist organization and their call to defund the police in the midst of the worst spate of unrest, revolt, and rebellion on the streets of America that we have seen in a very long time. Rashida Tlaib. Back to Black Lives Matter movement. When Fidel Castro died, just to give you a little more flavor of what they're about, the Black Lives Matter movement posted a eulogy for Castro and just to express their overwhelming sense of loss. Let's move on from there. I mentioned anti-Semitism, and here we are in 2016, March and July, 2 months of 2016, when Black Lives Matter movement delegations visited Israel. The trips were led by Professor Mark Lamont Hill, whom you may have seen in various guest spots on cable TV. In any case, they are throwing in with Hamas in particular, also on among the Palestinian populations of Judea and Samaria, occupied Palestine, as they would call Judea and Samaria, but that's not all. They call the entirety of the modern day state of Israel occupied Palestine, and they believe that it should be forcibly returned to, well, somebody or other that came from somewhere or other, because they're certainly not the indigenous people of the area. But moving right along, here is a speaker, this is back in 2016, speaking on behalf as a spokesman for the Black Lives Matter movement, condemning Israel for quote unquote genocide. Now this is again from the Black Lives Matter movement website, and I include its URL right down there at the bottom of the page if you want to go take a look at this. This is their statement on their website. We are committed to disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. How's that? Extended families, villages to raise the children. I suppose that is what they are promoting here, but disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. Well, unfortunately, in many, way too many African-American communities in America today, that nuclear family structure has already been disrupted. Over 70% of all African-American children in this country today are born to single parent families. Most often the mother, and very often those children wind up being taken care of by the grandmothers of the family. All right. I want to point your attention to another website. This is muslimarc, muslimarc.org website there at the bottom again. And this dates back to about 2016. This is one of my original slides here, where they posted a Muslim toolkit for police brutality. This is a Muslim Brotherhood linked advocacy group, and it is affiliated also as well with the Black Lives Matter movement. You can look up that and the toolkit as they spell out what to do about police brutality at their website. I want to move along here. Here's a piece of work. Her name is Khalila Sabra. She's an American, convert to Islam, obviously Sharia compliant, as you can see in the photo here on this slide. And she gave a speech back in 16. She formerly served as the MAS, Muslim American Society, Muslim Brotherhood Front Group, Executive Director for the Immigrant Justice Center. She worked, at least at that time, with the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice Executive Office for Immigration Review. Got all that? Okay. So in this speech she gave, which is on video, and you can find it online, she said the following, quote, "You will see Muslims murdered in the streets," end quote. And then another quote, "We are the community that staged a revolution across the world." She's talking about the Muslim Brotherhood here, referring to what happened during the Islamic uprising of 2011, especially in Egypt. Here we go. Quote, "We are the community that staged a revolution across the world. If we could do that, why can't we have that revolution in America?" Very clearly letting us know exactly what their objectives are and what they intend to do. Well, it's unfolding across America on the streets of this country right now. Now, this is brand new. This is from just a couple of months ago, in March 2020, a Chicago imam by the name of Omar Baluch told Muslims, recommended that Muslims should arm themselves. Okay, he is at a mosque in Chicago, Illinois. And at the time there, the depths of the coronavirus pandemic, he suggested in his online sermon that the coronavirus crisis presents, quote, "a very good opportunity," he said, "for Muslims to, quote, purchase firearms." He said that Trump supporting neighbors, quote, "don't necessarily love you that much." That was captured, I believe, by the MEMRI organization, Middle East Media Research Institute, in any case, online. All right. Back to more of the Muslim Brotherhood here. Its front group, the Muslim American Society, and its eulogy. Yes, eulogy for Usama bin Laden when he was killed in May of 2011. We don't have to go through all of this, but suffice to say, the Muslim Brotherhood was all about support for Al-Qaeda, Usama bin Laden, and obviously his successors. MPAC, another Muslim Brotherhood front group, Muslim Public Affairs Council, and here they are very openly aligning themselves with the Black Lives Matter movement. It is the MPAC is a key founding member of the USCMO, and I should probably add a very close working partner of Ambassador Sam Brownback at the State Department and his Institute for Religious Freedom. Even though he has been warned that MPAC is a Muslim Brotherhood front group, he still works very closely and apparently happily with Salam al-Mariyati, the founder and president of MPAC. In any case, this slide to show you through the placards, through the images on this screen, the close affiliation between the Muslim Brotherhood and its MPAC front group and the Black Lives Matter movement, but also with the Socialist Communist movement. And you can see that from the smaller letters on these placards and advertisements. All right, let's now move over to some of these anti-police Black separatist groups that very much were on the streets in 2016 and I expect are on the streets now again too. I'm showing you here around the frame of this slide, different logos that were posted at the social media sites of these groups themselves. That's where I got it from, their own social media sites. Bullets, gun lockers, etc. So we've got the Huey P. Newton Gun Club, which itself, as the name suggests, club, it's a coalition group that includes other groups like Blacks Against Racist Cops, African American Defense League, that's the one with the gun locker down in the lower right-hand corner as its Facebook page logo, African American Defense League. And then the Black Power political organization, and that one is off to the left-hand side at the bottom of the page. Here's some more nice social media imagery that I found online. Black Knights, sniper assassins, how's that? With a sniper weapon featured from their online page. The new Black Panther movement, the new Black Panther group takes its name from the original Black Panthers, and these are their logos. This is their imagery, and images of their senior leadership. Again, as you can see from this slide, some of this dates back a while, and I will need to update some of this, but this is very much the successor to the original Black Panthers. These are the guys, by the way, that you saw pictured in that photo outside of a voting booth. Remember this? From 2016, I think it was, the elections. Black-clad thugs of the Black Panther movement holding billy clubs outside of a voting booth, a polling place. And when then Attorney General Eric Holder was requested to look into the incident, he found nothing amiss. All right, new Black Panther training day video. This is just one of the examples of some of the things that at least then, 2012, this comes from May 2012, were found online in this training day video. And I do not know if it's still up to this day or not, but I cite it because it was up, and it was up for a while, in which the viewers are urged to ambush and kill police. Christian Adams, J. Christian Adams, was the one, you probably remember that name, formerly for many, many years, a career official with the Department of Justice. But back, I think it was 2010 or maybe 2011, he resigned from the Department of Justice over the directions that it was taking. And that's why I'm naming him here. He directly warned the Department of Justice about this video. But his concerns, as I say, were dismissed. This is in the middle, of course, of the Obama administration. Eric Holder is Attorney General, and they brushed him off and his warnings off. All right, I want to talk about the separatist aspect of the Black Lives Matter movement coalition. And here's an example of one individual inside of the overall umbrella group, Babu Omowale, and he at least self-identified as the National Minister of Defense for the People's New Black Panther Party. He very explicitly, and those he represents, wanted to break off certain states from the Union. I think we did this before. We've been through this before. He wanted to break off a certain number of states from the Union and create a new state, a new country called the Black Nation. The lucky 5 states were Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia. He was urging African Americans to migrate from other places, from other states, to these 5 states, and to rise up within them and create this nation within a nation that would be called the Black Nation. This is called treason. Here's an interesting, I don't know, tidbit, fun fact, if you will. And this also dates back, but the new Black Panthers Party actually brought the warring gangs of the Crips and the Bloods together, or at least superficially and maybe perhaps temporarily. And this individual here called himself an advisor to the new Black Panther Party and the head of the African American Defense League. And he issued a statement 4 years ago, said, "We are calling on the gangs across the nation, attack everything in blue except the mailman, unless he is carrying more than the mail." Well, what happened? In fact, actually, Crips and Bloods kind of, sort of came together, at least in Atlanta in July of 2016, for a joint march together and this posting online, however brief that may have been. Okay, let's move to the last of the three. Remember the three groupings. We began with the Muslim Brotherhood. We just finished talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and its associated groups. Let's finish now with the third group, which is the Marxists, the Alinskyites. Here again, of course, is Saul Alinsky, an image of his book, Rules for Radicals, written as a handbook for radicals on how to institute rebellion and revolution on the streets in a city, in an urban area in particular. Now, the USCMO, remember I talked about the Muslim Brotherhood political umbrella group of the USCMO, United States Council of Muslim Organizations, is openly allied with the Industrial Areas Foundation, which was founded by Saul Alinsky. It still exists today, even though he has passed on. The tactics outlined in Rules for Radicals include how to fracture society, how to institute street violence and chaotic protests. Well, what are we seeing today? Isn't this exactly the blueprint, the handbook right out of Rules for Radicals? Now, I want to show you the connections betwixt and between among the Industrial Areas Foundation, remember, Saul Alinsky's group, the interfaith dialogue movement in this country, which is what? A Muslim Brotherhood front operation to gull gullible faith leaders, particularly of Christians and Jewish congregations, gull them into doing the bidding of the Muslim Brotherhood, submitting to the Muslim Brotherhood, and then, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood itself. So across the top there, these three elements. Now, the reason I'm showing you this slide is that at the very top levels of the Industrial Areas Foundation, and I'm showing you also the 22 chapters of the IAF that exist in these various states, enumerated there, you can see them. But I want to tell you about the very top level leadership of the Industrial Areas Foundation, founded by the communist radical Saul Alinsky. Look at this list on the right-hand side of this slide. Bishop this, Rabbi that, Reverend that, Reverend, and oh, I think I recognize this name, Usama Jamal. Who's he? Secretary General of the USCMO, the Muslim Brotherhood umbrella group. He's in the top leadership of Saul Alinsky's Industrial Areas Foundation. Now, today, right now. Fun fact. Let me skip this page. It's just, and this one as well, or over it quickly in any case. These show you the various alliances and the affiliated members of at least one Industrial Areas Foundation chapter, this happening to be in DuPage County of Illinois. But just briefly look at the three yellow highlighted bullet points there of these members: Islamic Center of Naperville, Islamic Foundation of Villa Park, Mecca, a Muslim Brotherhood front organization of Burr Ridge. So very closely affiliated, Industrial Areas Foundation, Marxist Communist Saul Alinsky, and the Muslim Brotherhood. All right, Now, they are also, all of them, involved in refugee resettlement, as we can see on this slide here. They were co-leading, co-sponsoring this particular event, which took place about 3.5 years ago. But they're in Glendale Heights, I think this is Illinois, and it is a meeting sponsored by ICNA, Islamic Circle of North America, excuse me, ICNA Relief. And it was all about supporting refugee resettlement, bringing more refugees into the country. Okay, let's look now at some of these groups, the Marxist, leftist, allied groups associated with Antifa. Understand that Antifa is a very loose association. It doesn't have like a national board of directors or, you know, a board of advisors. It's not like that. It's very loose. It is fluid. Members come in and out. They're all over the country. This helps in many ways. If you are law enforcement and you're trying to figure out, you know, how these guys are organized or what their leadership is. But let's just look at Antifa and its origins. So Antifa is short for anti-fascist or anti-fascist action. This group began way back in the 1920s in Europe, especially in the countries Germany, Italy, and Spain. As if you remember the history, right after the Communist Revolution in 1917, and as the Nazi Party in Germany is beginning to rise up and coalesce, these two organizations, the communists and the Nazis, the communists and the fascists, naturally came to loggerheads. They were butting heads. It wasn't about the ideology, although there are differences. There are distinct differences between communism and fascism, but it was more about power. Who's going to rule the streets? Who? Germany, Italy, and Spain. Their core identity and tactics are similar. Anarchist, street anarchy. And this is being revived now in the United States. And we see some of this with Antifa that styles itself alt-right or anti-alt-right, anti-white supremacists, if you follow me. All right. Antifa, again, founded in Germany in the 1920s, took the name of communist street fighters that were really, I mean, fighting, mixing it up with the chains and knives and brass knuckles and what have you on the streets in Germany against the Nazis in the late 20s or through the 1930s. Antifa now has cells all over the place, and I don't even think I've captured all of them, but here are some listed here from of course, North America and also Europe. And they are very willing, the most willing perhaps of all the groups we've talked about tonight, willing to use street violence. Well, that's their roots. That's where they come from. That's what they're about. By 2016, and the presidential campaign trail of that year, as we'll recall, President now, Donald Trump, then candidate, was beginning to gain traction, beginning to gain followers. Antifa and its affiliated groups began to dog the campaign trail. And the FBI and the DHS began taking notice. They were beginning to warn state and local officials about them by early 2016, understanding the threat. That is John Guandola's group again, and for which I originally created the core, the beginning of this PowerPoint, now much expanded, but understanding the threat also was early in 2016 to present this material to the law enforcement classes that we taught, and I was giving this PowerPoint in its earlier versions. And law enforcement at that time in 2016 understood, and they were describing Antifa as confrontational, dangerous instigators of domestic terrorist violence. Some images about Antifa. They like to portray themselves as, you see this, this banner here, against white supremacy. Well, okay. But what are they really about? Become ungovernable. Institute warfare on the streets of America to bring down the US government. This is what they're really about. Often head to toe in black, with caps, black caps, jackets, pants, and the bandanas across their faces, usually all in black. You see these guys outfitted like this on the streets now. And very often they will have pretty expensive and even high-tech gas masks on against the tear gas and the pepper spray. There's money here. Furthermore, the way they travel, they move across the United States. This is known. Planes, trains, and trips cost money. There is money behind these guys. We'll get to that too. How about this one? All my heroes kill cops. That's Antifa. Here's another image. Look at these guys. They look like something out of the Middle Ages, don't they? Except for the banners, which are taken after the original banners of the 1920s. But these are the ones they're showing today. All right. You'll all remember the violent events in Charlottesville, Virginia, back in August of 2017, when there were two clashes, violent clashes between white supremacists and the Antifa contingent that came to confront them. The white supremacists were there in Charlottesville to protest the tearing down. Remember, this was going on back then, the tearing down of World War II monuments to different generals and figures from the South, from the rebel side. The Antifa came to oppose them, to oppose those who did not want to tear down the statues and were there to try to defend the statues. Well, the mayor of Charlottesville, Virginia, leftist, liberal, communist, ordered the police to stand down and let the clashes happen. And we saw them all over our TV screens. And it was pretty bad. And there was at one point when a vehicle, you might remember this, plowed into a crowd and actually killed somebody there. Here's a short list. I mean, this is just abbreviated list of some of the Antifa affiliated groups that were present in Charlottesville. These groups are still active today. They're on the streets today. By any means necessary. Remember that phrase that I mentioned from a few slides ago? The Answer Coalition. Workers' World Party. We'll talk about them in just a moment. Communist. Refuse Fascism. Got more about them in a couple slides. It's Going Down. Indivisible. A little bit more about them coming up. Here are the Red Guards of Austin. Clearly an Antifa affiliated organization by their flag, their colors, their imagery, right? Their Facebook page openly identifies them as Maoist, Marxist, Leninist, and anti-fascist. They are the ones, by the way, who caught attention because they sent some of their members over to Syrian battlefields to get battlefield experience fighting with the Kurds and with the forces, the Free Syrian Army, or I'm sorry, not the Free Syrian Army, but the YPG, which is a Kurdish militia, to get battlefield experience over there. Among these Antifa groups present in Charlottesville was this one I named By Any Means Necessary. And these guys are an offshoot of the Revolutionary Workers League, which itself was a Trotsky element of the new communist movement. Communist, Marxist, that's the theme of all of these different groups, one way or the other. Crime the Inc., kind of an interesting name, but that's how they call themselves. And from their website, they identify themselves as a rebel alliance, a secret society pledged to the propagation of crime, the Inc. This is an anarchist group. It was present at Charlottesville, and it holds specifically that anarchy is necessary to destroy white supremacy, as they call it. And they say that cannot be done in a democratic system that we have now. Excuse me, you'll see the quote again is from their website. They're down at the bottom of this slide. You can go ahead and take a look at that without reading it all the way through. Here is former President Obama, who organized a group called Organizing for Action. And this was his post-presidency organization to oppose the Trump administration. It is a community organizing center. It has that website listed up here on the slide, and the office of Barack and Michelle Obama. A few more images. These are posters. This one from Cleveland, Ohio, the New Black Panthers Twitter page. And this was put up on the Twitter page of the New Black Panthers in advance of a rally in Cleveland, Ohio. This is back in 2016, I think it is. But just take a look at this image here. Notice Professor Lamont Hill off here in the lower right-hand corner of the slide. Notice this one with a great big chain around his neck. And then behind him is the woman with the barrel of a gun sticking up behind the group photo. Cleveland, I should mention, by the way, Cleveland was the site, that's right, of course, 2016. This was the site of the Republican Party convention. That's what I neglected to mention here. That's why the poster. They were getting ready for violence in Cleveland in response to the Republican Party holding its national nominating convention there that year. Luckily, law enforcement converged on Cleveland from all over the state and also neighboring states and other places, and they kept the order. Another image, as you can see, against Donald Trump, against law enforcement, and against in preparation for that convention in Cleveland, Ohio, the year 2016. Nothing much has changed. All right, here is Revolutionary Communist Party. You thought communism went down when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991? No, the Soviet Union came apart. The Soviet Union collapsed. Communism did not collapse. The ideology did not collapse. Neither did the KGB, even though it split up into its contingent parts. So we have a presence of the Revolutionary Communist Party right here in the United States. And I don't know if you can see on the placards because it's kind of small type, but this is a Black Lives Matter demonstration that they're marching in. And all these nicely professionally prepared placards, right? Bear at the very bottom the line, RevCom USA. Well, that stands for Revolutionary Communist Party USA. That's who prepared the placards. That's who distributed the placards to Black Lives Matter. And here is a quote from the website of the Revolutionary Communist Party. In the yellow, I want to call your attention to that highlighted part. They are staging an ultimate all-out revolutionary struggle to sweep this system away. That's what they're doing. That is on their website for quite some number of years, but that is what's going on in the streets of America right now. This is not a protest about the murder of an African-American man at the hands of a white Minneapolis Police Department officer. That was the trigger. That was the spark. But the tinder, this is the tinder. The tinder was already piled up, was already waiting for whenever that spark might happen, and then it did last week. But this has been the plan. It is not about protest. Protest is guaranteed right of assembly, right of free speech, in right to petition the government for redress of wrongs, enshrined in our First Amendment, as long as it's peaceful. This is not about peaceful. This is about sweeping away the Constitution and the system of law and order of the United States government. That is called sedition. All right. I told you I would tell you a little bit more about the Workers' World Party. Here is its banner, a couple of other images from its website. Workers' World Party are Marxist-Leninist revolutionaries. They did march in Cleveland back at the convention in 2016. But as I said, law enforcement kept things under control. The Workers' World Party also were present at Charlottesville, South Carolina back in 2017. And they openly support North Korea and the regime of Kim Jong-un. That's the Workers' World Party. They are affiliated with Antifa. They're on the streets of America today. Communism. It's not gone. And here is the explicit alignment of the World Workers' Party aligning with Antifa. Some of their images, their placards, their banners in marches. All right, another group affiliated with Antifa, the Revolutionary Abolitionist Movement. Some images from their website. How about this one here in the middle? Isn't that great? Everybody armed, masked. Well, we're all supposed to be masked these days, but maybe not quite like this. Black outfits. The Revolutionary Abolitionist Movement calls for the abolitionism and revolutionary anarchism to decisively eradicate 21st century slavery. No, they're not talking about Islamic slavery in Sudan or Mauritania or some other places. That's not what they mean here. They're talking about America. They want to build an underground railroad, reminiscent, of course, of the one that operated before and during the Civil War, when slaves, real slaves in the South, were helped to escape the plantations and their slave owners and make it to freedom in the North. But now these guys want to build an underground railroad to help people escape from prison. Our Enemies in Blue is the title of one of the workshops that they offer. You can sign up for that at their website, which URL I note here at the bottom of the slide. All right, here's another one. Rise and Resist. There are way more of these than I can tell you tonight. So believe me, this is the tip of the iceberg. Rise and Resist is New York City based. It was formed in the wake of the November 2016 elections in order to oppose Trump's election and then his presidency. Quote, it is from the website, it is, quote, committed to opposing, disrupting, and defeating any government act that threatens democracy, equality, and our civil liberties, end quote. But it's mostly about opposing Donald Trump, whom they very much wanted to see impeached. Another group, locally based, Denver Communists. This is their logo from their website. They are openly communist, anti-law enforcement, anti-ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement of DHS, right? Department of Homeland Security. They are for open borders. These images on this page of the violence in the streets of Denver, these images come from the Facebook page of the Denver Communists and taken from the 30th and the 31st this past weekend on their Facebook page. Let me mention here Indivisible. Now, I'm not going to claim that they are on the same level of violence as some of these other groups we've been talking about in Antifa, but they're part of the overall coalition. And the group was formed from former Democratic congressional staffers who were kind of out of a job after the 2016 elections. And they sought to establish chapters all across the country and provide insider tips as former staffers on how to resist the Trump agenda. They are organized as a 501c4 nonprofit, grassroots advocacy. They stage town halls. Well, at the time before the coronavirus, they did. Office sit-ins at the offices on Capitol Hill. Disrupt. So it's not violent, right? But it's still disruptive. And you can see here their agenda. All right. One of the principal officers of Indivisible, and another one from their board of directors. All right, Refuse Fascism. RefuseFascism.org is their website. Here's an image from that website. This is an anti-Trump group, also founded after the 2016 elections by hardcore leftists, including from the Revolutionary Communist Party. They participated, Refuse Fascism, participated in this past weekend's protests. I got that in quotes here, violent protests in Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Honolulu, Houston, Indianapolis, Kansas City, New York City, Olympia, Washington, that is, Philadelphia, Portland, San Francisco, Seattle, Springfield, and I might have missed one or two. These guys are all over the place. They are very well organized. And to turn out the street thugs on a simultaneous basis, as they have done in all of these cities, that bespeaks quite a bit of organization. That's who these guys are. They're communist, they're Antifa. All right, here is their agenda. And I take this from their website. They openly state their goal is to drive out the Trump and Pence fascist regime. They're openly supportive, likewise, of Kim Jong-un's regime in North Korea. George Soros funds something called the Alliance for Global Justice, which sponsors a lot of these organizations and groups, sometimes through multiple layers of cutouts. But just to preview that for you, we'll talk about that in a moment here. This is a kind of a busy slide, but it is more from the Refuse Fascism webpage. We need to make this country ungovernable, quote unquote, declared a female leader for Refuse Fascism. That was shortly after the president's inauguration in January of 2017. We need to do, she said, what the German people should have done when Hitler was elected. You can see the rest of it, and there at the bottom is their website. Is where I took these quotes from, which actually was from a Daily Caller article. And there you see it from 2017 down at the bottom of the page. One more group here called It's Going Down, and their logo openly say at the website, we are anarchists. You think they're out there on the streets right now? Oh yeah. They call themselves, quote, a digital community center for anarchist, anti-fascist, autonomous, anti-capitalist, and anti-colonial movements. The mission is to provide a resilient platform to publicize and promote revolutionary theory and action. That's the street action. That's what they're talking about. Overthrow the system by any means necessary. They are involved not just in the United States, but also Canada and Mexico. It's Going Down has a presence there too. All right, let's move to some of the supporting elements for all of this. And then I'll conclude. Where are we? And oh, good grief, it's way late. Southern Poverty Law Center. You know who they are. They are a hate group themselves, although initially formed in order to oppose racism and the KKK, Ku Klux Klan in the South. They themselves have now become a hate group, smearing and calling out groups that stand up for freedom of speech and American law and order. Founded as a nonprofit, but now they've gone quite astray. They themselves are a hate group. This is their hate map. I'm sorry, this is kind of blurry, so we'll go right past that. Their objective, destroy them. There's not much ambiguity about that. Destroy them, anybody that they smear. Unfortunately, too many groups use reference to the SPLC for their own banning or marginalizing or refusing to discuss with, talk with groups on the right, or simply standing up for things like free speech and the American way. All right, agitprop is the term from communist times. Well, these are communist times. For propaganda. That's what agitprop is short for agitation propaganda, right? Agitprop. Lot of funders go into all this stuff. I'm talking about Charlottesville. We're talking George Soros, MoveOn.org, and many more. Let me skip through this because I know we're way over time. I just looked at my watch. More networks. This one on campus, the Campus Anti-Fascist Network. Look that one up. Funders. Okay. Who funds Black Lives Matter movement? Ford Foundation. Borealis Philanthropy, George Soros and his Open Society Foundation, the Hill Snowden Foundation, Solidaire, Nova Foundation, Association of Black Foundation Executives, I could go on, but you get the idea. Here's another list. Funders of Black Lives Matter. George Soros, of course, Ben and Jerry's. Well, I always like Breyer's ice cream better anyway. Ford Foundation, Plowshares, Rockefeller, Tide. Okay, you get the idea. These very large, supposedly philanthropic foundations funding the communist, violent, racist Black Lives Matter movement. More leftist donors. The Democracy Alliance is a donor club on the left, closely tied to the Democratic Party. They fund big money to a lot of these groups. Democracy Alliance. Soros money, we talked about that. Very last slides, I promise. I'm sorry to keep you over so long, so late. The Democrats, on the Democratic side. Now, as you probably know, and from Trevor Laden again, we've learned this, right? That a good number of the Democratic Party representatives in Congress belong to something called the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA. DSA is communist. It is Marxist. A large number of congressional members belong to that group on the Democratic side. Now, you'll have noticed during this whole last week of horrific violence across America, you don't hear Democratic politicians calling out the street protesters, Antifa, or anybody else, do we? I haven't. Maybe I missed it, but I haven't. They're sympathizing. They're sympathizing with the protesters. They're making excuses for them. Well, anybody would feel angry after seeing that video. Yes, we do. We do. Absolutely, we do. But we don't go out on the street and smash windows and attack people, club people to the ground, and burn buildings down. That's not standing up for Floyd, George Floyd, and the way he was murdered. The Congressional Progressive Caucus, completely silent to the best of my knowledge. Here's an image, probably not up online anymore. I think they took it down. This is the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, formerly a Democratic Party representative from the state of Minnesota. Here he is posing with the Antifa handbook, you know, the one they're using for everything they're doing on the streets right now. Okay, this is the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. Minnesota, I'm sorry, they're in a bad way. They're in the hands of the enemy. And he just took over the investigation into the killing of George Floyd and the prosecution of the 4 police officers accused in that murder. Good luck to them. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She promoted openly a fundraiser for Antifa members. This was back in September of last year, 2019. There was a straight parade held in Boston, Massachusetts. Counter-protesters against the straight parade included Antifa members, a good number of them who were arrested on charges, including assault and battery on a police officer. AOC promptly stepped up and promoted a fundraiser for them, those arrested, for their bail money to get them out of jail. All right, what's coming? What are we looking at? A convergence, as I've showed you in this PowerPoint, of America's enemies. The anarchist, communist, Marxist, leftist, in collusion with the Black Lives Matter movement, nationalist, national separatists, Black separatists, and the global jihad movement fronted by the Muslim Brotherhood, USCMO, here in the United States. Among these groups, what is common to them? A willingness to embrace America's enemies, to use violence, to disrupt political events, to assault the police as well as civilians, to take down, openly stated objective, to take down law enforcement, law and order, the system. Anarchy is the objective. It's the objective of all of them. Going back to Weather Underground in the 60s, Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, never went to jail, by the way. Here they are. All these groups, we talked about many of them tonight being affiliated. Anarchy is their objective because they think that out of the anarchy and the chaos of the streets and the collapse of law enforcement that we've seen on our television screens, that they can take power and then dictate terms from that point onwards. After President Trump's speech this afternoon, we hope not. The main objective, here's George Soros. This is his quote. The main problem to a stable and just world order is the United States. More scenes from protests. Organized chaos is what they're trying to institute. On this slide, this was for law enforcement, so this is specifically geared more to law enforcement than perhaps this audience. But in any case, being attuned to the indicators and warnings ahead of time. Now it's a little late, but what is going on in these different places, listed here on this slide? What do we have to do? We have to know who we are, first of all. We are the lucky inheritors and defenders of Western civilization, crucible of reason, of freedom, of order. We must be proud of our Western identity and treasure individual liberty, equality under the rule of man-made law, government by consent of the governed, the protection of minorities, and the liberties in the First Amendment of assembly, belief, free speech, and the others, press, and the right to petition government for redress of grievances. We want to conserve, that's why we call ourselves conservatives, or at least I do, to conserve what is valuable in our society against the forces of chaos and tyranny. What do we need to do? Learn the enemy threat doctrine, which is what you're doing here tonight, for any of you who have stuck with me through this very long presentation. That means study Islamic doctrine, read Saul Alinsky, understand what the Black Lives Matter movement is, and what are anarchists' objectives. Confront the enemy's genuine intent and motivations, not just the violent part of it. That's just the tip of the iceberg, as we said. Confront the whole iceberg, which is what? The intent to overthrow the republic, to overthrow the Constitution and establish a tyrannical form of government, whether it be Islamic or communist. So conduct study and analysis. We've got extra time now, right? We're all on lockdown, or at least have been. Enforce our laws. This is so important. This particular law that I'm quoting from US Title 18 is about sedition. This is the law against sedition. Whoever knowingly, willingly advocates, abets, advises, teaches duty, necessity, desirability, or propriety of overthrowing or destroying the government of the United States. That is sedition. That is forbidden. That is a crime. That is a felony. We need to enforce that. Within our society, be proud of who we are. American achievements like the SpaceX, the glorious SpaceX launch from over the weekend. Our culture, our heroes. Relearn our history, the history of Western civilization. Teach that to our children. Honor our heroes like those astronauts, but also the founding fathers, Medal of Honor recipients, Navy SEALs, Delta, Special Forces, Rangers, military, law enforcement, healthcare workers. All right, I'm sorry I've gone on for so long. Here is my contact information. Lopez Liberty LLC, just got my documents incorporated from the state of Virginia last week. My email, claire@understandingthethreat.org. And please, if anybody is still left out there, I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Claire, what a presentation. One clarification before we get into all of the discussion. I think you gave your email contact address as Understanding the Threat.
Oh, did I that is a mistake indeed. If I said that, I sent that away. It should be Claire@theunitedwest.org. Theunitedwest.org. Thanks, Mary. Sorry about that.
That's all right. You do a lot of work with John, so it's understandable.
And I was sort of talking about that, yeah.
I want to throw one comment out, and I thought all of these Democrat mayors and congressmen and governors, why aren't they out there screaming, Social distancing. Get your 6 feet away. You're going to spread COVID-19. You know, it's going to be coming back to hit us that they're going to scream that all of this protest was causing COVID-19 to continue on. You can hear it coming, can't you?
It certainly could. I mean, except for all those, you know, the black clad ones in the bandanas across their faces.
Yeah. Well, and
but yeah, I mean, you know, the law enforcement in some municipalities and states under tyrannical governors who styled themselves little petty despots, law enforcement was out there arresting fathers playing t-ball in a park all by themselves with his little girl and wife, forbidding people to have more than one person in a motorized boat, keeping churches closed, but the liquor stores open, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
The nonsense.
They can't keep their city safe. The one thing that I thought about, though, is what are your thoughts? I feel like we're in World War III right now on U.S. soil. We've got a domestic enemy that we're battling to keep this country free and keep it constitutional. How much do you think the law enforcement, the local police forces, are really trained to be able to handle this style of attack?
I mean, we can see in city after city, they were not handling the street violence. Now, part of that is because their own mayors, their city councils held them back from enforcing the law. And part of it, perhaps, because they really were overwhelmed in a bunch of places. Now, after the president's speech today, announcement at the Rose Garden this evening, a couple hours ago, an hour and a half ago, he is demanding that the governors and the mayors get control of their streets with the forces they have at their disposal. And if they need backup, the United States military will be there under the provisions of the law, the Act of Insurrection, the Insurrection Act of 1807.
Well, I think of it too in terms of what you said. What was it? The Red Guards, Austin Red Guards, were actually going over to Syria to become.
Yeah, they went over to get training with the Kurds.
Yeah. So if they're getting that kind of training, then our law enforcement might need to be the military.
Good point.
Yeah. So, Dick, I'll let you jump in.
Okay, well, somebody commented that the length is not the issue. Don't worry about the length of the presentation. It was so important. It was so important to they're applauding your presentation rather than worrying about the length. So thank you, Claire.
Numerous thank yous and excellent
good
presentation.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Dick.
Let's go back to, you mentioned John Guandolo, and John and other people help us understand the splinter notion. The notion is that you've got an enemy, but then you've got a really bad enemy, and you focus on Antifa. And now I see people talking positively about Black Lives Matter because they're not as bad as Antifa. And oh, by the way, I would bet you if you look at various Republicans in America, there are Republicans who don't seem to grasp that all that you talked about Black Lives Matter, they want to identify with the problem of the dead man in Minneapolis. I got it. But I think you're going to be seeing, unfortunately, and I'm very appreciative that you made so much attention on Black Lives Matter, their fundamental enemy of the state of America, of the country. It's really important because I see us making Black Lives Matter look good by making Antifa being worse. Is that something you see? Is that the
Absolutely?
Splinter?
You are spot on, and any the listener, viewer who mentioned it. The purpose of what I wanted to show you tonight is to show you how interlinked these all are. And yes, indeed, John Guandolo and also Steve Coughlin, who has taught with John, teaches with John now, talk about Maoist splinter movement theory. And all that means is that different lines of effort, seemingly coming from different directions, are all converged on the same ultimate objective, which is tearing down America. They're all aiming to tear down law and order, to cause chaos, to disrupt the streets, and tear down the United States of America. And so we sometimes see them as separate. We see Antifa, that's not Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter movement is not, the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, but the point of tonight was to show you how absolutely interlinked they all are. And I think perhaps I might not even have given quite enough attention to the sponsorship behind the scenes. You've got influence coming from Russia, and you've got it coming from the Chinese Communist Party. Certainly online, armies of bots all over social media, for one thing, but in other ways too, as Trevor Laden has pointed out, the backing, the involvement, the association of Chinese communists with organizations like Freedom Road, a socialist organization, its offshoot Liberation Road. Deep involvement of the Chinese Communist Party in our political system, in Congress, in so much of our business and industry. That needs to be said as well. So this really is not just a splinter movement within the United States, but internationally too.
Thank you for mentioning Trevor and the Maoist influence. I think I was shocked, when I heard that, from Trevor a while back. And I think many, many Americans, of course, now we've got China and the virus, but China's involvement in our political system through Freedom Road, Liberation Road, Trevor's done a great job of explaining that, and it works. It worked in the state of Virginia, if I understand Trevor's commentary. In the state of Virginia, it absolutely worked to have their funding, their operatives in place. And now we've got, I think the bottom line here, we should all be walking away from this very, very exceptional presentation is there is a revolution. There's a revolutionary army loose in America. Some of them wear suits, some of them wear shorts, some of them wear masks, some of them throw Molotov cocktails, some of them walk around in Congress. We have a revolutionary army out in America now. The news you started the evening with, which is news to almost everyone, is fantastic. We really need to support the president and watch to see what he does tomorrow morning and the next day, and watch these Democratic governors and watch them really, really carefully.
Hopefully they will take the president's words to heart, because if they do not, the federal government, the United States military will step in. It is a step, in my opinion, overdue, but at least now we can see that coming.
Claire, many of these groups are a 501c3, 501c4. Why is it we can't, didn't they go after the mob by way of following the money? Why can't we follow the money and find where the money's coming into these groups and identify them for what they are and shut them down?
Well, we certainly ought to be able to. I am hoping that somebody at the Treasury Department is thinking about this. Of course, in the past, under previous administrations and leadership at Treasury Department and Attorney General, they were too busy going after the Tea Party groups to think about these. But now it's different.
That's true.
And the funding really ought to be something that they're looking at, even though they're done, through cutouts to 501c3s, which is all done as a smokescreen and as a front to make it look legitimate. But if it can be established that the ultimate recipient of the money took the money, solicited the money, used the money for rioting in the streets, violence in the streets, then a case ought to be able to be made.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Claire, there are people that are talking about the fact that when we hear about Attorney General Barr and some of the other indictments that might be coming out soon and might be identified at high-level people in the deep state. By the way, if they were involved in a coup or in an attempt to overthrow the government, they might have been indicted for sedition. We'll see, because we've never seen an indictment for sedition. You've been talking about sedition for a long, long time. Maybe now, with the seditious people in the street, we'll actually have arrests for vandalism, for murder, for other things that are all really sedition. You've done a great job of explaining that tonight. Even if we take them off the street for any number of crimes, these people are seditious. Maybe is it possible this is a diversionary tactic, so that somebody figured out that they needed to. We didn't get the virus didn't do it. Now we need to have unrest in the streets so that we
Well,
don't proceed with the president looking at
yeah.
these other criminals.
I mean, as I said, I think the tinder was long piled up. The organization was there. Massive and multi-layered organization was already in place across every single state of the United States. Nobody knew, what would happen in Minneapolis the night of Memorial Day last week, but that was the spark. That was all that was needed. And then the word went out awfully quickly, as we've seen, to all of these different groups and organizations, and people started traveling. They got in cars and trains and planes, I guess, and they moved, and locally they moved. There was money involved in that, no question. Dick, there's another legal avenue, perhaps that's perhaps even broader than the sedition law that I put up there on the screen, and it's called seditious conspiracy, and that, along perhaps with RICO laws, might be something that could be pursued with these guys.
And again, that has to do also with crossing state lines and all kinds of other activities,
Thank
right?
you. Yeah, that's what it is.
Mary, do you have any other questions? We're running late, but do you have any other comments?
Yeah, let me just ask a couple from our attendees because they've been very patient. Do you believe that President Trump understands these issues?
No. I wish he did. I wish people like Steve Coughlin, John Guandolo, Rich Higgins could get in there and brief him. I'd be happy to do it myself. But we have no access.
We'll just do a couple more. What are we expecting next? We have to require our legislators to know this material. Dems are trained communists where this person lives.
Education, exactly, good point.
Yep.
Education is the name of the game, but I agree with John Guandolo when he places the emphasis over and over again at the local level. This doesn't mean we're going to give up on the federal level, members of Congress or the administration. Given the, any chance, we'll happily sit down and talk with them, brief them about this. But I think John's right that the focus of most of our effort needs to be at the local level, with local level civic leaders, with community faith leaders, leaders of faith communities at the local level, and of course with local law enforcement, because that's where the confrontation is taking place. It's on somebody's street. It's on somebody in somebody's neighborhood. They who live there have to be prepared for this, whether or not they are at the federal level. We'll happily help and brief and talk to anybody who will listen.
Good.
But John's right. This has got to be focused at the local level.
Any words of wisdoms for Canadians? We've got a few that are asking.
Well, thanks to all our Canadian friends up north there. I'm happy to see that it's not quite this bad up there, and I hope that it never gets this bad. But essentially, you've got the same organizations cross country lines embedded in your societies too, just maybe not as thick on the ground as it were. And I hope that you will not go through anything like this before your local leadership makes some changes.
Okay, that's all the questions. Go ahead, Dick. I'll let you close us out. Great presentation, though, but everybody, many comments said this is fantastic.
Thank you very much.
And many are asking how to get it afterwards. It's going to be out on the Sharia Crime Stoppers YouTube page almost instantly when we finish, but also I'll do a little bit of editing and it'll be ready for any sharing after that.
Yeah, Mary, if you can edit that very last page with the email, that's the main thing there. If you would, please. Thank you.
The email was actually correct on the slide there, Claire, I think.
Oh, it was? Oh,
Yes.
So just the way I said it, in other
That's
words.
okay.
Okay. If it's right on
rolling.
the slide, then we're good. Okay.
You covered so much detail. We're going to ask you for a final comment in a minute, but we're so blessed to have Claire tonight.
Amen.
You're not going to hear this presentation. You're not going to hear Claire's just done a superb job, and we really appreciate that. We will continue with our Monday night news analysis. And oh boy, is the news happening. Oh my goodness. Think about what we were just talking about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Next week, we're going to have Leo Holman on, and he's already said that he will be with Sharam Hadian again. Christine is with us on the 15th, and Claire will be back on the 22nd. Claire, we're not going to ask you unless you want to offer in a minute. What will happen in 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, when you come back on the 22nd, I wonder what we'll be talking about after what you said about what Donald Trump is initiating this evening. Last slide for me, and that's the fact that in addition to our Monday nights, we do have Dr. Mark Christian. He will be here again on the 4th Thursday. This time it's the 25th of the month. And you know what, Claire, I think you've basically announced that for unequivocal, we are at war and we are in a revolutionary environment. What can you tell our audience in terms of how to behave tomorrow and the next day, just in terms of how they can participate at the local level?
Well, I mean, for now and for the next couple of days, I think we're all probably going to be hunkering down. I do expect that with President Trump's decision, to demand a return to law and order, his promise of federalization of the National Guard, the deployment of U.S. military troops if necessary, I think he's going to keep those promises. So I expect that there is going to be quite a bit of street battling over the next couple of days just to test what he has said, what the governors are prepared to do, to test their resolve, to test their follow through. But I honestly think this is the defining moment, for President Trump in this election year. Before, I thought it was about the coronavirus, and I happen to be one of those who thinks that overall President Trump did a very good job at organizing the government, the U.S. level federal government response to the coronavirus. But now, I think this is the defining moment. I mean, one thing supersedes the other so fast your head spins, right? But I really think that he is stepping up as the law and order president. He has to. And I think by the same token, he has to follow through, with any of the governors or mayors that do not take it upon themselves to reestablish law and order in their own states. So I think this is a key turning point in this election cycle. The president is looking presidential when he takes charge of safety and security for the American people.
Historic. It's an historic day. It's an historic week. And we're so grateful to have you, Claire, tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mary, any parting comments, Mary?
No, there's so much information in this. I hope this gets shared everywhere and shared with the local law enforcement to understand what they need to be watching out for and to be ready, because we are blessed to have them on the front lines. We really are, and I thank them every day.
Well, that's a really good point. Share what you just heard. You have an hour, more than an hour's worth of material, and your assignment, if you choose to accept it, would be to go to the Sharia Crime Stoppers YouTube page. I mean, it'll be out there momentarily. It'll be out there later this evening. You can certainly get it and basically pick up the phone and share that with somebody tomorrow morning. As they see what's going on, they may be totally confused by what's going on in the news. And I think Claire's done a superb job of putting it in context. They need to understand all of these players and how bad this situation is. It is a revolution. We have Donald Trump. And hopefully you can do your part. So we'll be looking forward to seeing you next Monday night, and God bless you all in the meantime.
Amen.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, everybody.